You'll have to admit, old Buster here, my 1981 300 TD wagon, is looking pretty sad. Pretty sad. Why did it get to this point? Well, it all has to do with this right here. If you watched the last video in this series, you got to see me take this piston out of the engine, and you got to see why it was making that loud knocking noise. Any of you recognize that sound? That's the sound we were hearing while this engine was running. Now, there's some really good lessons to learn here. So what I've decided to do in this video is do a summation of everything we've learned, because this can apply to a lot of other diesels and it can apply to a lot of gas engines as well. So what I'm going to do at the beginning of this video, I'm going to go ahead and do a summary overview of the first 5 or 6 videos, show picking up the car, show diagnosing the knock, show the other things we tried to find out if it was not a serious knock, and then finally in the last video we ended up pulling this piston out. And I realized that, hey, this didn't really answer the question, did it? We got to see what caused the knock, but what caused the destruction of this piston? So at the end of this video, I'm going to open up the engine further. I'm going to take all the pistons out. We're going to look at everything. What was it? Was it lack of oil changes? Was it poor maintenance? Was it just general neglect? I have proof. I have proof of what caused this engine to fail, and I will show it at the end of this video, because I want all of you out there watching this video to not make the same mistake that the previous owner made on this old Mercedes diesel. Before we get into this video, let me take you back to yesterday when we hooked up the trailer and went out to acquire this beauty. I got Jerson here. We're going to fire this up. The glow relay doesn't work. We're going to try to start this without glow plugs. Well, we're going to put the new battery in there, and then we're going to use a booster and see if we can get the engine to spin fast enough. Oh, it started without glow plugs. Well, I'm not sure about that noise, but we're ready to roll this baby up on the trailer. And now we're going to try to determine if this is a good engine or not, if this is something we want to save. You want to make sure you check all the fluids. Well, that's kind of a nice sign when you've at least got oil in the engine. But you don't want to start one of these up and run it very long until you've given it a thorough inspection, particularly with all the fluids. Now, before I do anything else, I'm going to fire it up again and let you listen. Now, some of you may say, well, that's just normal diesel clatter, but I don't think so. You're bringing off idle here. It's not going away. I've had situations where these engines will knock with bad fuel, old fuel, or even gasoline. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to run diesel purge through this and see if that noise quiets down. Now, if you followed me over the years, you know I use diesel purge as a troubleshooting liquid. When you put diesel purge directly into the injection system of these old diesels, if the injection system is healthy, it should quiet it down, because a lot of noise comes from the nailing of the fuel injectors, and because diesel purge has more lubrication, it's going to quiet that knocking down. This is the emergency diesel fuel tank that I designed, and we do sell this on my website. It's also a great tank to run diesel purge through the engine. What I've done is I've separated this from the fuel system in the engine. Now, this is the old fuel hose that I disconnected. So this is the line coming out of the tank, and it's hooked up directly to the lift pump down here. And then you notice the return line, instead of going back into the hard line, going back to the fuel tank, the return fuel is coming right back into this tank. So this means I've isolated everything. I've isolated from old fuel, I've isolated from a plugged up fuel screen in the fuel tank. And now I'm going to start the engine, and I'm going to run straight diesel purge through the injection system. here. Can you hear the knock I'm talking about here? It's a little bit deeper knock than you normally hear just with fuel injection noise. I'm going to bring it off idle again. Now this is normally where fuel injector nailing should go away. But notice the knock, it's still there. Now I want you to take the sound here and kind of walk that in your brain. I'm going to take you over to another diesel engine that I believe is healthy, and you're going to compare sound. This is a 1983 300D, same engine. Do you have that noise firmly embedded in your brain? Okay, listen. Now watch what happens when I bring it off of idle on this engine. Okay, right there. Noise has gone away. So you see there's a very subtle difference here, but I think you can hear it. So let's go back to the wagon and discuss what we're going to do next. Before I pull this back in the shop for some further inspection, I want to do one more thing while I'm running on diesel purge. I want to see if I can isolate just one cylinder or one injector that's making the noise. And the way I can do this is to start the engine while the engine's running. I'm going to crack one of these fuel line nuts about a half a turn and see if we see any change in the sound. If we see a change in the sound, that means something's going on with that particular cylinder. I doubt whether that's the situation here, but I at least want to try it. All right, let's try number one. Look at the change in the sound there. Okay, let's see number two. Not much change there. No, not much change on 4, other than the fact that it's missing. Same thing there. Still knocking. All right, let's go back to number 1. That was the only one that was promising. Okay, now I'm going to race it up a little bit. No, not still there. If you are successful at isolating the knock to one cylinder, it usually means you got a bad fuel injector. Sometimes it's a piston slap, but most of the time it'll be a bad fuel injector. You replace the fuel injector and that knocking noise goes away. But in this case, the knocking sound is pretty consistent. At this point, about the only thing I can do next is to remove the valve cover and see if we have any noise in the valve train. But this isn't looking very good. So today's the day. We're going to open up old Buster's turbo diesel engine and we're going to find out what is making that knocking noise. Maybe the head being removed will show us some signs on one of the cylinder walls where they got a piston problem. But I suspect we're going to have to go ahead and pull the pan and pull the pistons out of the block, and that's going to take a little more effort. You can see I have removed the cylinder head from Buster's old ailing engine, and we're getting closer to finding out what the problem is. Right away, I got the head off. I'm looking down in here. I'm looking at the tops of the pistons. I'm not seeing any damage at all. And I'm not seeing any severe scoring in the cylinder walls. So I'm going to take you over and show you the head because, you know, I'm not seeing anything obvious there that could indicate what type of damage we're dealing with. Here you can see I don't see any damage to any of the valves, no damage to any of the pre-chambers. And at first glance, I don't see any cracks in the head. So it's still a mystery at this point. There's only two pistons that are all the way down where I can really feel the cylinder walls. So I'm going to have to rotate the engine over, but it's a two-man operation here because I have to hold this chain tight while we rotate the engine. So we're going to rotate it until the other pistons are down. Okay, stop there. Number 2's down. Okay, no scoring at all on the cylinder wall. Okay, let's go ahead and keep going. Okay, stop. Okay, there's no scoring on number 4. All right, stop. And we're going to check here all the way down. Well, that doesn't give us any clues at all. So I'm going to take the pistons. I'm going to see if I get any piston movement here. Uh-oh. We got a little movement on number 2. No movement on any of the other pistons, but this is the one that's suspect. Let's bring it up top. All right, let's see. Yeah, I can see a gap there, and we got movement. Look at that. Uh-oh. Any of you recognize that sound? That's the sound we were hearing while this engine was running. What's the problem now? What could it be? To know for sure, I'm going to have to get the engine up. We're going to pull this piston connecting rod assembly out of the block. If you've never worked on an old Mercedes diesel before, you don't know what mess is. There's nothing like this old diesel oil. Now, I was able to just pull the bottom pan. The pan on these engines is 2 parts. There's your metal smaller pan section here below the oil pump, and then you have the full pan. And I was thinking I'd pull this when I can get to number 2, and sure enough, I got to number 2. Now for the first reveal here. Are you ready? Is it a connecting rod? You'll be able to tell right away when you look at the bearing. Okay, look at that. That's actually a pretty good bearing. There's not even any scoring on it. So the problem is not a connecting rod bearing or a rod journal on the crank. For the second reveal, right here, we're going to pull this piston out, and the truth should reveal itself. Okay, go ahead, push. Oh boy, this is exciting. Everybody in the shop can hardly wait until they see what happened to old Buster. Well, the top compression ring is not broken. All right. Okay, what do we got here? Let's check the wrist pin. Oh, look at that. The wrist pin is okay, but we have a problem right there with the worn piston skirt. Look at that. Isn't that interesting how that wore so badly and we didn't have severe scoring on the cylinder wall, but these piston skirts have worn enough that allows the piston to slap like that against the cylinder wall. No broken rings, and the wrist pin is tight. So there's our problem right there. Now you're going to say, Ken, how did that happen? I've seen a piston wear like that before on the skirt, but I've also seen very severe scoring on the cylinder wall at the same time. Now there's a few little scratches in here, but you can see that cylinder wall is not that bad. But why did that happen? It's either heat or lack of lubrication or a combination of both. I wanted to check one other thing, and that's this oiler right here. The turbo diesel engines have an oiler mounted down here, at the bottom of the cylinder, and it sprays oil up so it keeps the oil skirt lubricated. So I realized the puzzle wasn't complete. And I know from some of the comments, some of you are saying, well, gee, you know, if he would have used better oil, you know, better quality oil, more frequent oil changes. Somebody said, well, if it was a heat problem, you'd have scoring a number 4 and number 5 cylinder because they tend to run hotter. There was just enough mystery left, okay? Enough mystery in this puzzle with Buster's engine failure that I thought we needed to open the engine completely up. We have an issue here with obviously a very neglected engine. So let's talk about engine oiling and whether or not Buster's failure was due to a lack of oil changes or to a lack of just good engine oil flow. I don't think it's oil. I know a lot of you said, oh, it didn't get oil changes, that's why it went bad. And over the 30 years I have been working on these old diesels, the number one thing that leads me to believe lack of oil changes or poor grade oil is sitting right down here, the camshaft. If you see a lot of scoring on these lobes, it's a pretty good indication this thing was abused. It did not get regular oil changes. And if you look at these lobes, particularly right up here on the top of the lobes, you don't see scoring. I've seen them where they've literally flattened out. And that's really a bad sign. But even more so than the camshaft lobes are the rockers. Sometimes you'll get a little bit of scoring on these rockers, and the cams might look okay, but just look at those rocker faces. I don't think this is oil. Here's another thing I want to show you. Here's the offending piston I removed, number 2. What I want to focus on here is the bearing. I don't think this engine has 260,000 miles on it, or I'd get some wear marks in this connecting rod bearing. These are almost like brand new bearings, and these bearings will also start to scratch up and wear when the engine has not received frequent oil changes, particularly on these old diesels, because the high combustion pressures put a tremendous strain on these connecting rod bearings. Just look at that rod bearing. Look at it real close. You tell me, did old Buster's engine here lack oil or did not get oil changes? I want you to look closely at this connecting rod crank journal here. Look at this. If I find an engine that's been neglected, poor oil or infrequent oil changes, you'll see scratching here. You'll also see scratching on the bearing. I went ahead and pulled one of the main bearings, and the journal on the crank for the main is amazing. It's like brand new. You could put this crank in a rebuilt engine, probably be fine. But look at this. Look at the bearing. This looks like a bearing on a recent rebuild that's maybe got less than 20,000 miles on it. There's no wear on this main bearing at all, so this is another clue that the problem with Buster's engine is not related to engine oil. Okay, we've discussed oil. Now let's discuss coolant, particularly related to engine heat or overheat. Look at this piston here. And not only this piston, but every piston here. Look at number 4, number 5. Notice there's no oil sheen there. Usually when I remove a cylinder head on these turbo diesel engines, there's always a little bit of an oil sheen on top of the piston, unless of course the engine's brand new. The markings I'm seeing here indicate to me excessive heat. And when I took a number of parts off old Buster's engine here, they came off real hard. When I tried to pull the torque converter out of the back of the crankshaft, it was stuck. It was like almost everything I removed was stuck. It was hard. The bolts were coming out hard, even though they didn't use Loctite. So I'm going to start by going back to the piston that was making the noise, number 2, and you can see the severe scoring on the piston skirt causing it to rattle. The other thing is the piston rings have lost some of their spring. I mean, they literally just kind of collapse. And that's indicative of an engine that has been extremely overheated, is you'll lose the spring in the piston rings. And you may get the engine running again, but you may find that it's an oil burner because the rings have been damaged. And I thought if it is an oil issue, the only thing it could be is this right here. This is the oil that mounts at the bottom of the cylinder wall that sprays up and sprays oil underneath the piston as it's going up and down to keep the skirts lubricated in these turbo diesel engines. I saw no damage here. I've seen one of these break off. I saw no problem with the passage. Well, maybe down internally in the block it's plugged. If you lose one of these oilers, either through a plugged passage or some sort of restriction in the sprayer, it's not going to be all of them. It's going to be just maybe one cylinder. So when we pulled number 1, look at the scoring. We have an oil ring that is literally seized into the ringland right there. What causes that? Okay, I'm going to rule out the problem with an oiler because I don't think 2 oilers will fail. When you see the other pistons, you'll concur. It probably was not an oiler issue. So when we pulled number 3, whoa, I really got a surprise. Look at the skirts on number 3. Both sides. Let's look at the rings. All the rings are free. What do we got going here now? We got 2 pistons severely scored. We got this one that's looking pretty good. And I got another surprise when I pulled number 4. It might even be better than what's on number 3, but the piston was so tight we had to hammer it out even when the rings cleared. What does that tell you? So finally, number 5. Look at, you got one little scratch in the piston skirt here. But on this one, we had seized and broken piston ring right here. Every one of these had a tight wrist pin. And every one of these had a good connecting rod bearing. So, what caused these pistons to start to go sideways in this engine? What was it? This is the coolant we drained out of the radiator in the block when we got ready to pull the engine. Now, I've never seen anything so bad. I mean, look at the silt in there. And then you can look into the radiator hoses. This is always a good sign here too, that we've had total neglect of the cooling system. Look at this right here. When have you seen that come out of a radiator hose? Imagine all this stuff floating around and rolling around inside that engine block. Not only do you not have any coolant, which helps to cool the engine, you have so much crud and junk running around in those passages that I feel that this is the big problem right here. If you have a coolant leak, get it fixed. Do not keep pouring straight water into the block. When I see a block that's so severely rusted inside, it usually means the engine's been losing coolant and people just keep throwing water in it. And eventually there's no coolant and no protection, and the engine gets really rusty inside. This could have been the source of a very small leak that caused the owner to keep adding water. This is just speculation. My speculation is the engine got hot, the piston started wearing against the cylinder wall, and over time it just got worse and worse. So that's just my speculation. Some of you might be thinking, hey Ken, is this the last we're going to see of Old Buster? Well, probably not. We're going to have some more fun over the next 2 or 3 days. We got a bunch of parts to pull off Old Buster. I think the final scene will be on the trailer with Buster leaving us forever. You know, leaving planet Earth because it's lived a good life, but just think, the parts will continue to live on.